Yeah, we haven't talked about really sex at all. Anybody want to, let me choose my words carefully, begin the discussion regarding the attitudes and behavior?
Okay, well this is probably different for the majority of teens because like I said, our school is very sheltered. But a lot of the times, there is sex, a lot of sex at our school, but it's just kind of like under wraps. No one really questions, like when you say like, oh, I went out with this person tonight, they don't say like, oh, did you have sex? You know, like it's not the norm. It's not a stereotype that like all the girls have sex at our school, but when you hear someone does have sex, you're not necessarily surprised because you know that it's there. It's just not a common topic at our school, I guess you could say.
Honestly, I think especially for teenagers, it's known as just what you do. If you have a boyfriend, you have sex with them. You know, it's definitely not the right thing, but high majority, that's how it is. It's just accepted. It's not looked down upon at all. And it won't be a big talk. It's like, oh, they had sex.
You know, it's out there, and so there's no real hiding of it. It's there, and it's what it is. So
it's like a battle, but not like it's like they're proud of it. Like you slept with her, you slept with him, then it's like, oh, like you got like street credit, like street credibility. But it's funny how like guys can sleep with anybody they want, and they call like a pimp or like a G, like an OG in the hood. When a female calls like sleep with people, you a hoe or like
hoodie.
You just a flipper.
Like if a girl comes out and says, I had sex with this guy last night, they'll be like, oh my gosh, you're a little whore. But if a guy's up there like, ah, yeah, nice work, like, that's awesome.
At our school it is under wrap, like, I mean you do find out and there's people that you expect like, oh, yeah, they had it. Like, you're not really surprised, but there's other people you're like, oh, they did? Like, and it's embarrassing because for the guy, it's never looked down upon like, oh, he had sex with her. It's mainly like, I can't believe she did that. Like, so I feel like it's mainly like the girl's fault. Like, how could she have done that? Like, type of thing. So it's mainly put back on the girl.
You know, we were talking about morals earlier. Just if everyone does it, then it's all right. You know, with cheating, hey, well, everyone else does it, so it must be. Or like sex, everyone does it, or drinking, or smoking, or partying. Just if everyone does it, then I guess it's all right.
Hi, I'm Michael Todd Wilson, licensed professional counselor, and I'm here with Dr. Doug Rosenau, who's a colleague of mine at the Intimacy Counseling Center just outside of Atlanta in Duluth, Georgia. And we recently co-wrote a book together, Soul Virgins, Redefining Single Sexuality. Came out just last week, actually.
Last week.
That's right, last week. Very excited about that.
Yeah.
And both Christian sex therapists at the Intimacy Counseling Center. And we're also joined by Erica Tan, who is a psychologist at Eden Counseling Center in Norfolk, Virginia, and actually helped us with the Soul Virgins book. So
great fun.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun. Well, we're here to talk about teenagers and the sexual culture. And you know, Doug, every generation of teens has challenges that are different from the generations that came before them. This generation is not much different, but there is one distinction. This generation has instant access to intimate details about every unhealthy and ungodly lifestyle that's out there, that's distorting God's values and His gift of sexuality. And these messages come from their schools, their friends, media, the culture, and unfortunately even from their churches. And so parents are having a real difficult time helping their teens navigate this adolescent time period. And really our heart is to share with them information and tools that will help them to be able to navigate through this tough season. And even more than that, we just want to give them confidence that even if their kids make really bad choices in life, in their adolescence, that parents are going to know how to protect, provide a listening ear, unconditional acceptance that'll help guide them on this journey. You know, one thing I think that this is confusing, and maybe Erica, you can mention this, is that in terms of sexual identity and the development in the preteen and teenage years, it's not very simple, is it?
No, absolutely not. When we look at sexual identity, we're looking at 6 different components. It's so much more than just the pictures of the people that they put up on their walls. We look at their gender, which is their sense of being male or female. It's kind of an internal sense. We look at biological sex, that is whether or not they actually are physically male or female.
So in other words, one is biology and one is how they view themselves.
Right, one is psychological,
Okay.
which is gender, and the other one is physical,
Okay.
biological.
With hormones and just a whole variety of bodily as well as being masculine or feminine.
Okay.
Right,
Yep.
absolutely.
So that's 2. What's the third one?
Okay, and so that third part is what we call persistence and direction of sexual attraction. So, for example, if we have an individual who consistently and persistently experiences attractions to members of the same sex, then we would say that that individual has what we call a homosexual orientation. In contrast, an individual who persistently and consistently experiences attractions to members of the opposite sex, that person would have what we call a heterosexual orientation. So, with that in mind, we want to look at the fourth component, which is intention. What do you do with those attractions? What are your decisions about what you feel?
What are the choices?
Right. What are the choices?
I love your Canadian, a boat. That's okay. Yes, go ahead.
So the fifth part that we want to look at is behavior. So that's the actual choice that they make and what they do with it.
So intention of choices is one component,
Right.
and then actual choices is also a component.
Right. Although somebody may have an intention to do something, for example, an adolescent may feel like he or she really wants to and intends to sleep with his or her boyfriend or sexual partner.
The behavior may
Choice
not
may
reflect
be very
that.
different.
Right, their behaviors.
Right.
Okay, the fifth one, behaviors. Good.
Absolutely. And by the same token, behavior can sometimes shape sexual identity. In the sense that if an adolescent experiences premature sexual activity with members of the same sex, that may play into his or her sexual identity in terms of
Date
weighing
rape, other kinds of things.
and other things.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
behaviors.
Or
would
just
have a
maybe
real-
experimentation with a cousin or something,
Right.
which really isn't sexual abuse. It's just sex play in some ways. But
Okay.
So the last component is the part where parents come in and do a lot of shaping also. And this is the valuative framework. This is the worldview. These are the values that the adolescent holds onto because that valuative framework is going to affect the choices that he or she will make if it plays a larger part in his or her
Right.
sexual identity.
That's why I think it's important for parents to remember that, like Michael Todd was saying, their kid may make a mistake,
Right.
but we're talking at 15. If life expectancy is 85, we've got a lot of time for that value still to kick in, and things that they're doing and the framework they're setting is making a powerful difference at 25 and 35 and 45.
And yes, there may be consequences, and sometimes very serious consequences for the choices they make, but it doesn't mean that life is over.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that
Right.
it's all for nothing.
Right.
Exactly. So what
Yeah.
we want to do is we want to help the adolescents to broaden each of these different perspectives, to not be so narrowed in on one aspect. Well, what's interesting is that different research shows that between 10 and 25% of adolescents question their sexual identity. They question their sexual orientation or their attractions, like, who am I? Am I, heterosexual? Am I homosexual? What's going on here?
That's a lot. So at some point in adolescence, they question that. 10 to
Absolutely.
25%.
It seems as if in adolescence, along with all other aspects of their identity, that's something that they're confused about, that they want to explore.
Sure, because they're questioning, what's
Yes.
my career going to be?
Right.
Yeah.
Who do I want my friends to be? Do I want my values to be the same as my parents? And this is just, for some, one of those things that becomes. they
You two
question.
used a word that I work with teens as much, but both of you had used the word bi-curious. And I thought, what an interesting word for an adolescent.
Yeah.
Of saying, am I same sex? Am I opposite sex? Am I curious? Am I bi? What am I exactly?
Right.
Yeah.
It's very true. So we have that large proportion that questions. But the studies also show that it's a much smaller percentage that actually identify as gay, lesbian, or bisexual. Among adolescents, it's about 1% who say that I have a homosexual orientation.
Wow.
Among adults, it's about 6%. But what's interesting is that this is much less than the 10% that's reported by Kinsey.
It's a shift somewhere in that adolescent period. where the curiosity sometimes doesn't end up with that preference.
Absolutely. It's like,
Yeah.
what does that experience mean? And how they make meaning of it can determine whether or not they want to identify as gay, lesbian, or bisexual, or disidentify from that.
So then, in other words, if I hear you correctly, delaying making meaning out of these feelings and out of these curiosities or whatever as an adolescent, delaying that into adulthood, could mean that for the vast majority of them who are confused, it might be a non-issue in adulthood.
And
Or
Michael
denying
Todd,
the labeling, too.
yes,
Or
denying
denying
the
the
labeling.
Sorry,
Denying the
delaying the
labeling.
labeling.
Delaying the
What I was going to say is that really applies to the heterosexual, the kid that's trying to discover what masculinity is, or femininity, and what we call in our book a soul sexy femininity and a soul sexy masculinity, but also the behaviors we were talking about, where there's a lot of drama, and they're trying to figure out what's going on, and their friends are experimenting, and they may not be experimenting. That delaying some of this opposite sex closing on and even delaying some of the behavior is so critical to allow them to slowly work their way through this. And what's alarming, I think, is how in this generation, in this era, in this youth, in this teen culture, behavior has become so commonplace. And that the masturbation thing is really similar. We've usually said somewhere around 95% plus or minus for boys. Girls has grown from probably 60, 70% up into the 80%. But things like what is sex, oral sex, anal sex, versus actual, intercourse, that is so changed. And like we were saying, some of that is that oral sex is almost today's kiss, as it was in another generation.
That's alarming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think what's also alarming is that it's not just the behaviors, but it's the values. It's that there's a dissolution of the importance of sexuality in terms of, as a behavior that you want to engage in marriage. Like, it's completely devalued. It's
Right,
just an
and so we get
activity.
terms now like hooking up, which is so valueless, or friends with benefits. A friend that you want to be sexual with somehow.
So, but friends with benefits is more where two people agree they're going to engage in sexual behaviors, but they're also going to agree that there's no romance to it. There's no relationship other than one of convenience.
So there's no meaning to the relationship.
Right.
And what's equally terrifying can be that like 12 million Americans a year contract STDs.
Wow.
And a lot of these are adolescents. And there really isn't safe sex in terms of condoms don't work. And we're seeing within the Christian community that because they're trying not to have intercourse and defining other things as not sex, that there still is a lot of consequence of this, unfortunately, when we get it to no values and just the behavior.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it seems like one of the things that we should remember, too, is the fact that, yes, is sexual behaviors among teenagers a problem? Absolutely. It distorts God's values. It has consequences that could be a lifetime with STDs and pregnancies and things like that. But at the same time, we as people who work with youth and parents and whatnot have to keep in mind that the behavior is really a symptom of the problem. There is a deeper issue that really is the problem. And if we just simply try to stop the behaviors, it's going to manifest itself in some other way.
Absolutely.
So we do need to address the behaviors, but we also need to address what's underneath it.
Looking at heart issues.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole soul and value part of that sexual identity.
Right.
You have control over how you appear. If you sleep around, you're known to be sleeping around. If you don't want to be seen as a sexual object, then don't let people see that. There are girls where guys would beg, don't even bother. She won't give it up. She's hard to get. And they leave them alone. I mean, nobody can change that for you. You make the decision yourself, and it's how you dress, how you act, how you appear, and there's a huge difference. There are many girls who, they don't want to be seen that way, so they just carry themselves in a more I don't know, just like a classy way. And, you know, if you show that you respect yourself, you will be respected.
I think the way you carry yourself, the you know, what you're looking for in a girl, girls will respect that about you, just as maybe guys will respect that about females. You know, that, you know, if you're known as, I don't know, an aggressor or whatever you want, I don't know, someone who make a move sexually, then, you know, I think you'll earn more respect if you hold yourself, like I think you said, classy, or use your.
And girls do avoid guys who are known for being aggressive.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, word gets around, and just the same with guys. I mean, if a guy's known for being too pushy, I would never go out with them. I wouldn't put myself in that situation.
So with regard to creating healthy sexual values, I guess it really goes back to being based on God's design for sexuality, right, Doug?
Yeah, we so often get that question, why did God make sex? Why did God create sex? And to me, it's like the Creator was up there, God is love, 1 John, had this loving heart, this relationship within the Trinity, and wanted somehow to have word pictures, to have some means of expressing this creative, loving intimacy that He had. And to me, sex is His grand metaphor.
So if God is an intimate being, He created us to be intimate beings as well.
Right.
Okay.
And our sexuality then, we kind of look at it as, it has kind of two different sets of expressions. One of them really is more of a gender family expression, brothers and sisters. And then another part of it is really creating the erotic sexuality that is designed for marriage. And so when I teach teens, it's so interesting that their vocabulary at times is not God's vocabulary. It's not around intimacy. It's not around connecting, relating. It's around scoring, get some,
Right.
you know, those kind of behaviors. But it really is, when we look at God's heart, being male and female and being able to relate as male and female really is all about these intimate relationships and the ability to create and to express intimacy. And then when we look at it in a kind of a simple way, it's like God created Adam and Eve, and God created Adam and Eve to create erotic sexuality and marriage. And for every Adam, there's an Eve, and for Eve, there's an Adam. And it's not like one teen boy was saying to me, are you saying God wouldn't let me experiment with 4 or 5 before I settle on? I said, no, you don't experiment with 4 or 5 other people's Eves.
Right.
You have your Eve out there. So it's that idea that we have that there's a fidelity here that's much deeper because it's based on God's heart and it's based on intimacy. And it's really looking at not just physical virginity, but a soul idea.
But that doesn't mean that physical virginity is not important, right?
Right, right.
Okay.
That it really is a, you know, that may be an ultimate expression of our respecting other people's Adams or other people's Eves. But it still is really a heart thing. That mother that's heartbroken because her daughters had sex. I'm saying there still is a value system that can be created that really gives them soul virginity, that gives them a deeper idea of what our sexuality is all about and our intimacy is about, and how they can reclaim for themselves and really become this soul virgin, this person that values herself, himself, and their partner.
So it's really about teaching teenagers what sexuality is for, why God created it, and that it's something more than just not having sex, but it's about a heart attitude that desires to please God, that desires to be faithful
Right.
to how God created us as sexual beings.
That also values what God intended for their sexuality. That it's not just something to be passed out like Halloween candy.
Right.
You know, for those who celebrate Halloween, or, you know, candied apples.
Right.
It's not just for other people to partake of.
Right. And there's some such benefits to this, like you were saying, the whole God thing.
Absolutely. I can see how it would help to create just an attitude of honoring other members of the opposite sex as brothers or sisters. And just that it's not about finding your potential mate. It's not about, you know, looking for the next one, but it's about, okay, I really value you as a person. I really value you as a person that God created, you know, who is a great match for somebody else. Not only in terms of honoring people, but just being able to honor and respect God's sexual intent.
And
Like,
draws
that's
us
huge.
to the Creator more, and lets us love Him and love ourselves and love others. And I liked your word because I think that's really key as parents teach this is respect. And they do that when they respect the opposite sex and they have respectful relationships. And they do that when they respect their own sexuality in really good ways. That to me, when I'm thinking, how do we create these values? Respect is such a key word. I think stewardship is one that you like.
Well, let's go back to what you said a little bit earlier in terms of, there's gender sexuality and erotic sexuality. The gender sexuality is boys and girls, adolescents, trying to learn how to interact with the opposite sex.
Right.
And that has to be a necessary precursor for being able to treat someone who might be your future Adam or Eve with respect as a human being.
Right.
Absolutely.
But yeah, the whole idea of stewardship, in Matthew, there's the parable of the talents where each person is given a different amount and they're supposed to steward it while the master's gone, and then he comes back and holds them accountable for what was done. I think one of the applications of that passage is the fact that God gives us things to steward in life, and that we are responsible for what we do with those things, and that God will ultimately ask for those things back, whether it happens to be the money that we have, which is the example of Scripture, but it also is the stuff that we own, our car, our possessions, our talents, our relationships, our friendships, our spouse, and our own sexuality. And so how we steward those things is important because they don't belong to us. Even our sexuality doesn't belong to us. It belongs to God. God gave it to us as a gift and said that we could share that with one person in the future, which would be our Adam or our Eve.
Right.
And a lot of teenagers don't think in the future about that.
But you know what's exciting to me is that as we work with teens, they don't want to hurt each other. Now, they're caught up in the culture, and they're into the buzz and the excitement, and at times they just want to score.
Right.
But when you really present, you have these sisters, you have these brothers, do you want to respect them? Would you like to steward them? Would you like them to steward you to help you be better mate in the future as you spend your 50 years of marriage? Can I help you? They respond to that, I think. There is a desire to help their tribe grow.
Yeah.
And to protect their tribe.
Yeah. But it takes the time and the intention to sit down and help them understand values.
Right.
Which in a value-less culture,
right.
if parents and educators don't sit down and teach them values, they're not going to get it from the culture.
Oh, certainly the boundaries will be missing.
Yeah. And it's not just physical boundaries. It's not just saying, okay, don't touch here, touch there, don't do this, don't do that. But I think we need to encourage adolescents to consider their emotional boundaries too.
Wow.
In the sense of, okay, guard your heart. Don't give it so freely to somebody, to the next person that you meet, in anticipation that, okay, something's going to come from this, because they don't know that. I mean, they're still trying to figure out who they are, what their preferences are, what their likes, dislikes are, and whatnot.
And so many parents have had to work through those tearful discussions of the young lady, especially, who's fallen.
Right.
Allowed herself to be put in places she didn't really understand how to set the boundaries. And it isn't as easy as just physical behaviors. The heart and soul with sexuality gets so involved and so affected. And thank you for saying that, because I think that that's so important, especially for teenage girls.
Absolutely. Teaching them to cherish what they've been given, who they are.
Yeah.
The other person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of like we're saying that some of this with parents is, it's going to happen, and we're going to give some suggestions, but it's going to happen over time in a lot of differing discussions. And some real mom-to-daughter heart-to-hearts, or or aunt-to-daughter, or who knows what, but just to niece, but just a lot of differing heart-to-hearts. Trying to communicate, respect yourself, learn to steward the other person.
Right.
Learn to set some boundaries ahead of time. Don't let your feelings rule.
Right. Sons and daughters, I tell parents it's not one conversation that you wait to have when the kid turns 13.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or to believe that somehow the school, even the Christian school, is going to teach those values. Or that somehow, well, they'll just figure it out as they go along. It's going to take deliberate, intentional conversation with teenagers over a time, as you said, looking for those teachable moments, to be able to help them to absorb values that are godly, that are Christ-like, into their teenagers.
Absolutely, because if the parents don't share these values with the kids, they're going to share it amongst themselves, and then they create their own theology of sexuality, if you will.
Let's define it. What did we talk about? As you all talk about sex, what do you mean by sex? Is it
Sexual intercourse.
intercourse? Only intercourse. All this discussion has been about intercourse.
Sex, when people throw around sex, they talk about the actual intercourse.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if they say like hooking up or or whatever, I went out with him for the night, whatever they're gonna say, then usually people get the impression that they didn't have sex. That's with me. Like if they say I hooked up with him this weekend or something, then I don't think they had sex.
So they did other things.
Right.
Sexual,
There's
but
other.
not intercourse.
Yeah. There's definitely other.
And okay, the other things are not. Other things are not sex. Sex
Throw it
is
out
just
there.
intercourse. Everything else is just
Sexual.
whatever.
Sex.
Yeah.
And it's
out
pretty
there.
pretty prominent among just. I mean, it's just out there. Heavy sexual activity.
I mean, it's like a line. It's, oh, I didn't have sex, but I did this. Well, you're okay because you didn't have sex. But I mean, oral sex is something completely different.
Yeah.
It's like it's the shades of gray thing again. Yeah, isn't it? I was just playing it in my head. But yeah, so I think it's definitely not quite as bad if you didn't have sex, or you didn't really have sex, it's just oral sex. It's like a common occurrence. So it doesn't quite have the... I don't know where I was going with that one, but...
How young does oral sex start to become common?
Oh God. Yeah, it depends on the place. Middle school, yeah.
Middle school?
It's weird, like now it seems like kids are starting to do sex younger.
Yeah.
I have...
Oh, sorry, guys.
Oh, at my school there was this 7th grader, and this teacher was walking down this road by our school, and they saw 2 7th graders oral sex on like the side of a road that go to our school. So like it happens really young, and with the whole guy and girl thing again, nobody remembers the guy's name. He's just the guy on the side of the street, but the girl is like labeled for life at our school. The guy gets like a pat on the back every once in a while.
It's definitely happening at a younger age. Like to when I saw it, to what it is now, the age is getting younger for like anything.
Okay, guys, let's talk about some practical things that parents can do to help their teenagers with these issues.
Right.
Now, from the get-go, we should say that these are really applicable for parents of all teenagers, but really, these need to start in middle school.
Yes.
Because that's where the real issues are starting now.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I mean, you can keep your head in the sand that it's not happening, but it's really middle school when this stuff is becoming an issue.
Just newspaper articles now, the middle school with the oral sex and other stuff, it's just, alarming, but you wait till 12 or 14 and you may be too late.
You're behind the curve. That's
Yeah.
right. The culture is already having its
Right.
way with the kids.
Right.
And imposing its values on them.
Yes.
So, here's just a couple of things. First of all, we have to provide protection. There's a certain level that kids are going to do what kids do, but within the home, there are certain things that parents really need to do in order to limit access. No other time in history, I mean, if you wanted to get into trouble, you had to go outside your home to some seedy part of town to get into trouble. Now the seedy part of town comes into your home straight through the internet. And if parents don't have some kind of filtering system on their computer, it's a shame.
Not to mention their televisions.
And that's true, and the televisions, because so much is coming in. So finding some kind of at least a monitoring program. And granted, kids know so much more than their parents do about the computer, but that's no excuse anymore. Parents have to become educated to figure out what they have to do.
Absolutely.
So whatever it takes.
One of my colleagues who works with kids and teens, 9-year-old sexual addiction to pornography on the internet.
Wow.
9.
Oh my goodness.
That's so sad.
Yeah. So these filters.
So, yeah, either some kind of they have filters, they have accountability programs, they even have certain programs that will prevent kids from typing private information into the computer and sharing it online. So do some research, and we're going to provide in the bibliography some different possibilities about this, where you can go, but get some kind of something on the computer. Second thing would be iPods. We mentioned that at the very beginning, the report about kids downloading pornography. I don't think any kid needs to have access to an iPod or any kind of player that allows them to view video. You know, they can have an MP3 player that'll play music, but to have it with video is just there's just too much of an opportunity to be able to use it for other things. So, you know, that may be something to consider. Same thing with cameras and cell phones.
Yeah.
You know, these cameras are being used for all kinds of things. There's a reason why cameras are not allowed in most gymnasiums. You know, when you go to work out at a gym, there's a reason they don't let you bring that thing into the gym.
Right.
Okay? Because people are taking pictures and they post them on the internet. Kids are just doing crazy things. So it's just about responsible parenting, providing, you know, kid needs access to a cell phone, fine, but beware.
Or digital cameras. I have a client whose father found out that her boyfriend had posted pictures on the internet, like just an email, had taken pictures of himself, loaded them on the computer, and sent them to her.
Right.
Well,
Wow.
yep. And they don't have to, like, I appreciate what you said, don't have to be a technical geek. You cannot cop out on this one. You've got to work with technology with this generation, with the teen culture.
And parents need to know where their kids are. You know, parents need to know if the kid's up on the computer at 3 o'clock in the morning. The computer needs to be out in a public place in the home, not in some little private nook someplace so that nobody knows what's going on. Just practical thinking through things. If your kid has a space on MySpace or someplace else, go online, find out who your kid's talking about, put a password on the computer so that you have access to what they're doing. Do the research, figure out how to be able to do those things.
It seems to me that the accessibility that the adolescent has to technology has to be commensurate with the parent's accessibility to that technology.
So in other words, you're saying that a parent who really isn't quite as familiar may want to restrict a little bit more what their kids have access to until they can figure it out. Yeah,
good.
That might be wise. That might be wise. Doug, talk a little bit about creating dialogue. We referred to that a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
And that's so important.
I think parents can get intimidated by the culture and the language, but then I'm a child of the 60s and 70s, and we created new language and, you know, love child and a variety of, you know, new words. And so I would just say, don't freak out. Begin the dialogue, and they will respond some. Don't freak out. Also, we've said this some, to the behavior or the given incident. Help them sort through the bigger context, the whole sexual development, identity, creating intimacy, because they will discover, you know, internet pictures that shouldn't be there.
Right.
Or they will discover their son at 3 in the morning on pornography or other kinds of things.
Right.
But if they can just be aware and try to be able to, even using their own vocabulary, but not shutting down or getting reactive. It's so easy as parents to be so fearful and well-intended, but not be able at times to just create the dialogue.
Yeah. And I guess if a parent is a little fearful about how to have that dialogue, maybe husband and wife or you know, with a sister or brother be able to practice the dialogue with an adult as if they were talking to their child, become comfortable with using the language, and then be able to go to the child and have that conversation.
Right. And we had said earlier, and it is important to be able to also help the child work through the mess and not close on everything, to give them options, to give them ideas, to say, okay, you're not a physical virgin. Okay, you're struggling with some same-sex attraction. You are bi-curious or whatever. But talk to me, son. Talk to me, daughter. Let's talk about this some. Let's see what this is all about, and let's not close on this identity or make sweeping conclusions about your whole life right now.
It really does require the parent to be safe for the adolescent.
Yeah.
If he or she doesn't perceive the parent to be safe, they're not gonna. They aren't going to speak to the parent.
So in other words, that's that unconditional love that no matter what it is, son or daughter, that you've done, I'm still here, I still love you, you can still talk to me. Now it's going to be a little weird for me, I'll get over that, but keep talking to me so that we can work through it.
Absolutely, it's the idea of being an emotional bowl. I got that idea from Lisa McMinn's book, Growing Strong Daughters. But Mark McMinn writes about how he is this emotional bowl for his daughters. He allows them to come, talk to them about anything. He doesn't pull out what he thinks should go, what thoughts they should discard, or what feelings they shouldn't have. He lets them sort through it. And then afterwards, he'll sit there with them and kind of talk it through.
Right. So
Because
allowing the bowl to be there, them to pour it in,
Right, to be available.
and being available.
And I guess
Right.
if you've created,
Right.
if you've intentionally created that relationship with small issues as you've grown that relationship over
Yeah.
time, even when a crisis happens or a child makes a bad decision, you're going to be the constant there
Right.
that they come to process and talk through things. And that's the time that's most critical for them
Right.
to have an adult who has values to be able to stand alongside them.
And we've talked about this already a bit, but it may be worth elaborating, is that you can't just do the big talk. Those don't work. But going to this adolescent movie that you ordinarily would not want to go to, but going with your children and then doing some real dialogue about values afterwards. It is so... Cars are a good place to teach values because you don't have to look and be embarrassed. You're
Right.
looking straight ahead. Did I just hear you say oral sex? Talk to me about that. You know, where you can...
That's good.
But somehow where they can create a context and to jump on the moment in good ways because they'll let slip during the course of their life.
Yeah.
I mean, their time with the parent. Some different things that they could create that dialogue in little bits and pieces and create the values we're talking about.
And one way to do that in a non-judgmental way, rather than saying, I can't believe you just said that, or that's wrong, or whatever, maybe as your adolescent son or daughter is saying things like that, to ask them a question. And to allow that child to be able to share without
Right.
just jumping on them about
Right.
what your judgment is. Because you can say, well, tell me what that means to you,
Right.
or help me understand what you're
Right.
talking about, or what is, where did you get the idea from? Even though you have a judgment about it, encouraging your son or daughter to share.
And if I'm using that metaphor of the bowl again, I think that there's ways that we need to just let them show us their life, and then we can help them sort through with values what they may want to pitch out.
Right.
And how
Absolutely.
to access and the emotions and the commitments and the boundaries we talked about. Yeah.
What do you like about that song?
Right. Getting them to question
Right.
for themselves. I mean, obviously, my questions that I'm giving them are kind of leaning them in a certain direction, but it gives them the freedom to be able to share.
Well, it's the idea of an inoculation. Just like, for example, when you go to get your flu shot, you introduce a little bit of the virus into your body and then you develop an immunity to it.
Right.
If you can engage an adolescent in that dialogue.
And in the
right,
culture, which
and
is
in the
there.
culture, right.
Right.
And you kind of question them about why it is that adolescents in their realm may like this song or whatever, and really get them to think through it. You'll help them to strengthen those values. You're inoculating them against
So
an
in other words-
absorption of, of those values.
So as you're just living life and you see a sign on the side of the road, you say, well, what is that talking about? Or what does that mean to you? Or you hear a song on the radio, that station that they're listening to, and you say, what's that song about? What's it talking about? Getting them to talk through those things from their point of view, and then maybe giving them a different perspective.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Because they're so peer-driven that we can then bring in some of God's economy and some of our maturity and wisdom. But if we don't allow them to get there and talk, you know, and create the dialogue.
Well, let me just pitch out a couple of questions, and you guys
Okay.
kind of give me some,
Okay.
what the answers might be. What if I'm a parent and I say, what if my teen is sexually active? What should I do?
Well, haven't we kind of said, get beyond the behavior to help the child?
Yeah.
Be safe, listen,
Yeah,
be the bowl.
right. I mean, I know that just lecturing on STDs won't be enough, but it certainly is permissible.
Yeah.
And
they need good information.
Right, to really give good information. And I think things about talking about, we were saying about really being able to protect their peers. What are they doing for that girl or boy that they're dating right now? What are they really doing in helping them develop what they need to be? And how are they stewarding that? How are they respecting their own sexuality? Those deeper value questions rather than the knee-jerk, oh my goodness, she's sexually or he's sexually active.
Right. And reiterate to the child, I love you no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What if my child comes and says, I think I'm gay?
I think a lot of it applies too. To be available, to let them talk through, and to explore with them. You know, what is it that's telling you, or who is telling you that you're gay? Tell me about those experiences. Tell me about those feelings. Let's think this through. And if you need one, we'll find you a counselor.
Right. Almost what we said before, that if 10 to 25% are going to struggle, and yet in adulthood we're down to 2 to 6% in terms of set or questioning, Yeah, there's a lot of dialogue needed there,
Yeah.
and not the reaction.
Okay. So here's a question. Let's say about internet pornography or about some of these other things. Should I play the role of detective or of the police in my kid's life?
Yes. No, I mean, that's a good one. It's a good one.
I think being aware, definitely. Be the investigator, but don't be the interrogator. Because
Okay.
I've noticed that a lot of adolescents will shut down as soon as the finger comes out and the, you know, the hard line questioning.
Mm-hmm. Because there's some policing about saying, no, you cannot have an iPod that downloads video. I don't care if Jimmy and Susie and Johnny do, you can't. There is some protection in being the police, but we all know that if it's not going to be internally motivated, like just telling a teen, true love waits, that'll get them through their junior year of high school maybe sophomore year of college.
Yeah.
But if we could really tell them more internally why we question or what's against pornography, or what is it that we're really looking at and why we're policing this, so that we're trying to, like you say, not just interrogate or not just impose, but to really somehow in a good way get them to catch the value and to grab it for themselves.
I hope that when I become a parent, that I would be able to not just impart values, but to impart a system of thinking to my child that will help him or her to select appropriate values, to select godly values for him or herself.
So in other words, I can't really impose my values on my kids, because if I try to come on too strong, they're just going to reject it.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that I don't have the ability to influence them, that I can't share with them my point of view, that I can't
Right.
strongly encourage them in a certain direction, and when the rubber meets the road for certain critical issues, set a boundary for them that protects them.
Right.
And have more influence than parents realize sometimes. We get clients all the time that will go back to something that mom or dad or grandpa or uncle or a pastor or a youth pastor said that has powerful influence on their lives in college or in that single never married that's growing towards 30 and 35 now.
So in other words, what I say today may not affect them tomorrow, but it may plant the seeds for years down the road, something that will come back to them.
Yep.
I think in line with that, we need to encourage parents to be parents and not their children's best friends.
Wow, yeah.
You know,
Especially in the sexual arena where they're working
Absolutely.
with development, identity, values, boundaries. Yep.
Yeah, sometimes you do have to do the tough thing, I guess, for your kids. Okay.
Neat.
How do we, as parents and caregivers, access help? Where does that come from?
a lot of it has to do with looking at resources around you. For example, talk to other parents who have adolescents. Find out what it is that they've done, what they've found to be effective, what they've found to be ineffective. You know, look to youth group leaders, youth pastors, other church members, people who are invested in your child also, because I think they have a lot of feedback that would be valuable to the individual. And
Buy good books. But that really is some of our goal.
yeah,
Right.
Is that somehow we are going to create over the coming years more within the Christian setting that can assist parents, like AACC doing this video.
Right, that's
They
true.
can truly assist the parents to find those resources, videos, books, other things, and in some ways aren't out there, but we'll create over time.
Right. And there
Yes.
are a number of good books out there for parents
Right.
to help their teens and adolescents. And actually, we're in the process of revising that Soul Virgins book specifically for adolescents,
It
too.
will be
So
out in 07.
hopes, Lord willing.
Lord willing, yes.
Lord willing. So, what about counseling? How?
when parents bring their teenagers in to see me, the first thing I say is, you know, congratulations, because you've just prevented some bloodshed. You have a mediator. You have somebody who's able to go between and say, okay, you know, we're going to stop this discussion right now. Do some policing. Let's have everybody calm down and breathe and whatnot. A different perspective is often very helpful to parents.
And I guess the counselor's not emotionally invested either. So, you know, sometimes the adolescent might do something just to jerk the parent's chain, whereas, you know, a counselor is sort of not really invested and can more objectively speak into that son or daughter's life to some degree. And there are a number of ways of finding counselors too. I mean, even AACC.net has a list of resources for counselors, Christian counselors around the country.
That's the American Association
for Christian Counselors, who's
ACC.net.
doing this video. Focus on the Family maintains
Absolutely.
a very large database of Christian counselors. So there's a lot of different places and resources. And as you mentioned too, your own church may have relationships with Christian counselors in the area that they trust, who work with adolescents, deal with certain issues that might be best for working with these teenagers on these issues.
Yeah.
So lots of resources.
Yep. And I like what Eric was saying, is it does empower really both teen and parent with that mediator at times, with the counselor, with that ability to get another voice in that can be parental or can be a friend or can be whatever, to really access. So, yeah, parents do really have some resources, and we're going to, as time goes on, help create more.
Yep.
So you're not alone.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
And that really is a big takeaway, is that you really aren't alone. There are resources, there are people out there who can help. It's just a matter of asking for it.
Wow.
So here's a bit of parting encouragement. We understand that staying current on today's culture is very difficult for the people who care about adolescents. The temptation for them to stray is at every turn in the road on their way to adulthood. Unfortunately, the answers that we have to give them aren't nearly as easy and as simple as we'd like them to be. But here's the important thing to remember. Doing something that's motivated out of a heart of love and concern is always better than doing nothing motivated out of a heart of fear or indifference. So whatever it takes, take the time to understand the technology that your kids are using. Create dialogue with them. Sit down and use those teachable moments to be able to talk to them about what's going on in their world. Learn the basics about the technology that your kids are using. Create dialogue with them in those teachable moments of life. Seek to influence them, but don't seek to control them. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Ask for help from friends, from youth workers, from a Christian counselor. Take the time to do these things. Your kids are worth every minute of it.